Welcome to Heavy Revy TV. I'm your host, Brian Christian. And this morning, I was sitting here thinking about, all right, what should I talk about today? And I felt like, we're still in the season where people need to understand triggers. And, uh, and especially when it comes to communication. One of the things I understand or have understood is that you know if you're the reason we're always focusing on how to communicate better outwardly with one another, right? Because we want peace. We want our oneness to be real, not just a teaching. We want our oneness to actually be experiential. And so for us to be able to do that, we can't focus first on outward communication. We have to focus first on inward communication. So to the degree I know how to communicate with myself, good morning, Danielle. Um, to the degree I know how to communicate with myself is to that degree I can communicate with others effectively. This is really important. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about not just how to use the present situation to restore your history or to transmute your trauma-based belief system emotionally. But I want to share a scripture with you that I think will kind of give us an overall view of why we have so many problems today. Good to see you, Daryl, and all those that are joining us. Please like and share. I think today's lesson is going to give keys for a lot of people. So if you know people that struggle with triggers, well, we all struggle with triggers, but in particular, they can't own their own stuff. They project on others. They struggle with gossip and slander. They're constantly scapegoating. This would be the message to send to them. So I want to read you a scripture before we get into this. All right, because this is something that's important. We need some practical application here. We need to stop turning a blind eye with the fake Christian love that we've been taught, the codependent, passive love that just sweeps it under the rug and says, well, we'll just keep loving them to life. That's good. Keep loving people to life, but also help them to quit going through the same cycles. And so and only those that know how to communicate inwardly and have dealt with the lies they believed about themselves can effectively communicate outwardly um, to those that still can't see their own stuff. And this is a very touchy place because we have to deal with it. See, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say I've dealt with some of my stuff internally. I've dealt with. I realize that the people in my life are triggering me, and that it's my stuff. Okay, I've realized that aspect, but maybe I have other areas in my life that are still in denial. Okay, I'm going to what? I'm going to promote religious indoctrination. I'm going to promote performance. I'm going to promote, you know, uh, there's going to be a twist on anything I say. Okay, it's going to be for revenge purposes, all in the name of loving somebody else. Because even though I might recognize that my present situation is not the source of my pain, if I haven't dealt with my own bitterness towards myself, towards childhood, friends, family, whatever, it's going to come out. It's going to come out twisted. Okay. Now let me just say this again. I started out with saying this: to the degree you know how to communicate with yourself inwardly, is to the same degree you can communicate outwardly. If we only focus on trying to fix our communication with one another outwardly without facing ourselves inwardly, we've yet to learn how to communicate, and our communication will simply backfire, turn into a fight, turn into a debate, and all of these types of things. Okay. Um, I'm going to read you a scripture. It's good to see Christy. It's good to see you. It's good to see you, Royalty, and everybody that has joined us. Welcome. All right, so I'm going to be looking at Ephesians 4. I'm reading it off my phone. And I'm going to start with the verse, which is almost near the end of the chapter. And then we're going to go through and kind of look at the context here. Context is everything, right? In our own lives, in the scriptures, and all of that. Okay. So it says here in verse 30, we'll start at verse 30. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. All bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and slander must be removed from you, along with all malice or malicious behavior. Okay. Be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. So this is the end of chapter 4 of Ephesians. And so what happens is we hold on to a wrong perception of ourselves, and then we attempt to not grieve each other. Because when it's talking about do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, let's just be honest. If the Holy Spirit can be grieved by your behavior, then the Holy Spirit probably has a trigger and is probably going through something. Okay. So the Spirit isn't grieved like we've been taught. This is dealing with the Spirit in each other. This is dealing with in our humanity, who we are in our true identity being grieved by projecting false witnesses on each other, by projecting our own stuff on one another, and it's grieving each other's hearts as spirit. That's what it's talking about. You know, if God, I know God has been depicted as this earthling that reacts according to humans and has been made in the image of mankind's own religious issues. Okay. And so as long as God is reduced and his image is reduced, we're constantly going to be given over to a debased mind in our own identity and the way in which we see one another, in the way in which we interact with one another. So let's kind of go back here and see what is leading up to this verse so that we can kind of get into this a little bit more. So if you kind of go all the way back to the beginning, whoops, I just lost my place here. Let me find it again. If you go all the way back to the beginning, it says, therefore I, Paul is speaking here, the prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. I guess that starts out with you being okay in your own skin, with you loving who you are. The areas that you despise who you are, you will also despise in others. Everything you've judged within you will be judged on others. Remember, what does it say? Do not judge not, but with the same measure you give, it's measured back to you. Well, it starts out from the inside of us, okay? And then when we measure it out, it's going to backfire right back on us, right? All right. So the manner worthy of the calling which with you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, being diligent to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Religiously, we've tried to do that, and it's called silencing ourselves. It's called biting our tongue. It's called putting on a fake smile, okay? It's called being a hypocrite, okay? And we've all done it, where we just keep our mouth shut. And normally there's a couple different reasons why we keep our mouth shut. First and foremost, we don't want to deal with any more rejection that we already have. So out of our rejection, we pretend that we're loving somebody by allowing them to project their stuff on us. Okay. All right. And so we're guarding our lives and we're guarding their lives. We're now justifying both parties so that we can continue to have a cycle of defeat in our lives. Okay. So there's nothing spiritual about that. Nothing spiritual about being a welcome mat. There's nothing spiritual about any of that stuff. I did another video on love, and I think I can't remember what it was titled, but you can find it on my YouTube and my Facebook. I want to say it was about a couple weeks ago or a week ago. Actually, it was before I took off to go pick up the truck. So like 3 weeks or so ago. And I talk about turning the other cheek and how turning the other cheek has nothing to do with allowing yourself to be used and abused. Anybody who allows himself to be used and abused and thinks that that's God, testing them to see if they're spiritual or worthy or any of that, that's all based out of self-rejection. That's all based out of triggers and dysfunction. It's not based out of anything healthy in your life. But I talked about the turning the other cheek is going from the left brain to the right brain. Okay. So we're entering the Christ mind and we're entering the disposition of Christ in discerning what is going on so that we can deal with our triggers, but also break the cycle through right relationship and accountability and healthy boundaries with those that want to continually be narcissistic in our lives. We don't want to give them permission to be narcissistic. It's that simple. The more and what's one of the reasons why we don't speak up? First and foremost, our own inadequacy, that we're unheard, so why bother? Okay? That we're misunderstood, so why bother? So what does that do? It just feeds that we're going to remain being misunderstood and we're going to remain being unheard. That's all it does. It solidifies that that's who I am. It doesn't take that away. It seals it. All right. Secondly, because we're dealing with inferiority issues, we're also going to be more aware of what others think about us. I mean, what will everybody think if I call somebody on their crap? They're going to think I must be triggered. And believe me, we can be. So we definitely have to check our heart to make sure that you really can't call anybody on their crap if you're triggered, because it's guaranteed it's coming out of self-preservation. But if you call somebody on their crap outside of a trigger and it's for the purpose of restoration, you're helping to break a cycle, and guaranteed you're going to have people that don't like you because they're triggered in the stuff they have not dealt with themselves. And through that lens, they're going to now judge you. All right. Maybe they were called on something in their trigger and they didn't see it. And so they just allowed that to fester as justification within themselves to protect themselves more. And now they're mad at you because you've just brought that back to the surface in them. Okay, so this is something we have to keep in mind. All right. All right. So as we read on here, it says here that we are, verse 3, being diligent to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Remember, it's the unity of the Spirit. It's not a surface thing. It's an intention thing. It's a heart thing. It's an internal thing. So you're gauging all this internally. Okay. Bearing with one another in love. Bearing is, you can look at it as enduring. You can also look at it as bearings. If you know anything about cars, there are bearings inside the wheels that, not the tires, but where the wheels connect, there are bearings in there so that when it's spinning and there's friction, the bearings allow for it not to break apart, not to overheat. So you have bearings with grease so that there can be spinning and friction to get where you need to go without destroying your ability to get and to go. And I think a lot of times we want to bear with one another, but we're bearing with them out of our own inadequacy that's now justifying our stance so we don't have to face our stuff. So some of our mercy to others is really a false mercy to ourself, because if we see something in another that is off and we've repressed in ourselves, justified in ourselves because we've been duped in our own perception of it, we're now going to justify them. We're not, and we're going to justify them. We might judge them and say, yeah, they're off because we've judged us. But because we've been silent towards ourselves, we're not going to say anything to them. And again, I'm not saying go out and be in other people's business. I'm talking about relationships in your life, real relationships. Those are really the only ones that we're accountable to converse in at a deeper level. Now you have the fake relationships, or those people that are just there, to get something from you, especially if you're in the ministry and you're a target. And the moment you don't give them what they want, you're all of a sudden the enemy. And especially if you're in the forefront trying to communicate truths or help people see a different angle, you're going to be targeted. You know, you're going to be the enemy of other people's minds. Okay. Um, you want an example, Danielle? Okay. Well, let me move on. I'll try to give some examples as we go. Okay. Because I want to kind of give a full side of this, and then I'll give some examples. Goes on in verse 4, there is one body, one spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. So you'll see here, there is a posture that is revealing that everything is being mirrored as one. So somebody else's problem can be my problem if I'm triggered. They might be projecting their own mess, but if it triggers me, guess what? We're all one spirit, and there's a flow through all of us of the same issue. And now I can look at myself rather than making it about them. See, separatism allows me to justify my own pain that I don't want to deal with by making you my problem. Oneness has to face yourself in somebody else's problem that now triggers you. Now, if it doesn't trigger you, your oneness with them mirrors back who they truly are by your own freedom from triggers. Okay. Okay. So you wanted, Danielle, you wanted me to give an example of how we justify ourselves. Okay. Let me see here. Let's say I'll give one of my own examples here. This was a long time ago. Anytime. Okay. So I lived in Sacramento, California at one point. That's where I grew up. And I'd be doing these gatherings, and, you know, people would come from all these other different churches and ministries. I do Saturday nights, and people were getting refreshed and hit with the glory and drunk in the spirit and getting revelation. This would be back in the late 90s. And anyway, the pastors around the city would find out that they were coming to my meetings, and they didn't know me, or they had heard some things about me. And of course, some of the stuff I teach is out of the box. So they immediately concluded I was new age and they needed to protect the flock. So instead of coming to me, so you see, they were off by what they were doing. They were completely off. And that's where we find our justification. We look for where somebody else is off first when we have a trigger. So in those days, I was still dealing with a lot of self-rejection that I wasn't aware of. Most of the time, we're not aware of how much we've rejected ourselves until somebody comes along and mirrors it. Okay. We're in denial. We're going to talk about how triggers deny themselves. All right. And so, not knowing I had a lot of self-rejection, these pastors, all of a sudden, everybody would disappear. We'd be having this grand old time, and then the next meeting would come and zip, nobody there. And I would hear through the grapevine that those pastors in the city told their flock that I wasn't of God, that I was trying to deceive them, and they needed to get away from me, but they would never come to me and confront me. So I would justify their cowardice, and I would then start coming against them. Okay. Now I wouldn't come against them openly. I'd come against them in prayer. I would remember back in the day, the old school way of praying David's prayers out of the Psalms. Let the angel of the Lord get them. God, get them. They are an interruption. They are stealing. They are destroying your people. And we would pray all these intercessory prayers. And really, it was just venting out of our own inadequacy and rejection. Okay. I would then put it all on them, and I would immediately believe that I was being persecuted for the name of Jesus. Now, they might have very well in their own minds been persecuting me. But ultimately, was I truly being persecuted? Because if I'm being persecuted, I was doing everything right. Now, even though outwardly I was ministering love and unity and grace to the people, inwardly I was still trying to convince myself of that love and that unity and that grace by speaking it out and burying what I really believed about myself under the facade of truth, an objective truth that had not become subjective in my experience. Any truth you receive that only hits your intellect as information, and here's how you know, if the truth you hear, you immediately run with it before you've experienced it, and you're claiming it and standing on it as the totality of truth, I guarantee you the reason you're running with it so quickly isn't because it's truth to you, but because it's there to now hide the past pain that you don't have to face. Uh, because eventually we get talked out of that truth by our own experience. But when truth is an experience, it removes lies and you can't be talked out of truth. And we'll hopefully try to cover that a little bit more in a minute. I'm trying to put a whole bunch of stuff in one sitting here this morning. All right. And so these pastors would come against me, and I would see them rejecting me as persecution to justify the inward rejection that was actually being confronted. Now, once I got healed of the inward rejection, I began to realize, oh, this is coming from me. This wasn't being taught in those days. And none of the stuff I'm sharing right now was being taught in those days. It was all about focusing mentally, confessing, crying out to God, coming against those who would try to interrupt the anointing. The gospel could be stolen from you in those days. The devil could steal and kill and destroy in those days. We're now realizing it was our own mindset, our own devilish ego, our own adversary in our mind that was stealing. But back in those days, we were scapegoating using devils and demons, and therefore we could then label people as Jezebel and Ahab and Leviathan. And, we were just projecting our emotional pain in the form of demonic labels so we didn't have to face ourselves. Well, once I got healed, all of that stopped. Sure, I still got people that didn't like me, that wanted to come against me, but it was no longer an issue for me. I saw that, oh, that's their stuff. And most of those people I wasn't in relationship with, so I didn't feel the need to confront for reconciliation. That's their problem. I just keep doing what I'm doing. But most of it went away and was then turned around and became a road of favor. So a lot of the external roads of rejection that are blocking you are there to point out where you've self-rejected. And once you deal with that, most of it is no longer needed and goes away because it served its purpose. And those roads of rejection become roads of favor, maybe not with those people, but with others that come right after that. And sometimes with those people. All right. It depends if they were able to deal with their stuff as well. It's called quantum entanglement, right? We're all one spirit here. And so let me read on just a little bit more. But to each of us, verse 7, grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore, it says, when he ascended on high, he led the captives, or he led captivity captive. Okay. And he gave gifts unto men or unto people. Okay. Now, this expression, he ascended, what does it mean except that he also had descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is also the one who ascended, so that he might fill all things. And then it goes into the fivefold ministry, the equipping of the saints, verse 13, until we all come to the unity of the faith. Now, let me go back here for a second, because the ascending and the descending here has nothing to do with the sky or the earth in this physical, vertical, up and down motion. Ascending here is being able to discern outwardly what you have mirrored inwardly. The inward and the depth. See, when it says that Jesus went to Sheol, the place of the dead, and he set free all those that were held captive in a prison, he preached the gospel to those in prison. I think it's in Hebrews or in Peter, somewhere around there. It's talking not about some physical prison under the earth or some spiritual prison under the earth that's somehow separated from us, where people have been put aside or separated as wheat from chaff like we've been taught. It's actually talking about the lower mindset of the carnal mind and the higher mindset of the spiritual mind, or left brain, right brain, okay? So the carnal mind is the place where Jesus went, Golgotha, the place of the skull in which he descended into the historical woundedness generationally of the belief system of the culture of all mankind. And he began to bring the truth of the spiritual mind, or the truth of the higher frequency of the mind of God, and begin to transmute the conclusions and lies of historical woundedness generationally that went all the way back to Adam's belief of being separated from God by concluding that his physical realm was his ultimate reality and judging who he was by what was going on around him, the cares of this life. That's why he was naked. That's why he had to clothe himself, because he became aware of the visible as his reality. Jesus comes on the scene in the New Testament and says, the kingdom is within you, showing that you're not to look by outward observation in discerning your life, but to judge everything internally. That's why we mirror back and forth to renew our own minds, okay? And so that's the ascending and descending, okay? This has to do with going in and transmuting the carnal mind, which is death, into the spiritual mind, which is life, by dealing with your death mind. And our death mind is our conclusion of what we believed we were or were not in a traumatic experience. Okay, it doesn't mean we have to sit there all day long and go through every little thing we went through. It's actually not that difficult. But eventually it becomes an automatic thing with practice, okay? I did a whole training on this, which is available. Anybody wants to know more about it, just text me on it. Or you can go to the website, and I'm still working on putting up the graphics for it, but it's called the Basic Shift Training. It's 12 hours of training in video form with a 80-something page workbook that's downloadable, and it gives you all the info on this and how to posture in this. So it's really good. Plus, we do these sessions to help people get started until they can do it on themselves. All right. Now, if I skip down here to verse 13, it talks about after this ascending and descending, and the fivefold ministry is put into place, which is really not what's been taught. It's really a progressive unveiling of our own identity and us becoming an example of the mind of Christ to others so that they can wake up and come into this. It's talking about coming to the unity of the faith in verse 13. And of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. What is maturity here compared to immaturity? We know that Paul talked in other places about, this is how I know you're still acting like children, because there's contentions and strivings and arguings going on. You have not yet matured. You're still operating as carnal. And so wherever there's constant striving, arguing, competing, gossiping, slandering, you're a child, you're still in your diapers, you're still pooping on yourself, and you want to blame everybody for your own poop. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but if you put that in relation with your own kids, let's bring your own natural children into this. And let's say you have a child that is constantly hitting other children. And now most of the time we haven't learned good parenting skills. So most parents would tell them, stop doing that, and discipline them and put them in a corner and shame them and just leave it at that. And what's going to happen to the kid? The kid's either going to stop doing it outwardly or do it more outwardly. But definitely what that child is going to do is take it inwardly and realize that they cannot express the pain they were already going through that led to them hitting other children. Okay. So there was an issue already there. And on top of that, that issue is swept under the rug. And then they're shamed for trying to express emotion around what they can't understand of a belief about themselves that is causing them to hit kids in the first place. And so It just compounds the issue. So this is what parents do. Now, what do we see in the church? We see the similar thing. We see this amongst Christians and spiritual and people that claim to be spiritual. Is we do what? What do? We bury it. We bury this stuff. All right. And we shame people that they didn't measure up and they just need to stop doing this and start doing that. Or there's going to be consequences. Now, I understand there sometimes needs to be consequences, but ultimately, we need to get to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter here is dealing with the ascending and the descending place of the mere reflection of the external and the internal. Learning to communicate with yourself, learning to understand that your present situation is never the source of your pain as an adult. It might be adding another conclusion, but it's all coming from past stuff, childhood stuff. It's all coming from the past. First 7 years of your life is the program. I've taught on this before. That's where you're programmed. That's where you adopt what your parents believed about themselves that was lived out as reactions around you. You adopt that is your identity. You adopt everything they said to you that they said was wrong about you. You adopt. All the things that you now believe about yourself because of the absence of good things they needed to tell you. You adopt that. That becomes your lens. From that point on, we are viewing everybody's actions and reactions around us from the identity we adopted in the dysfunction of our own family as children. Okay. And what happens is we come to religion, or, because we don't come to Christ first through this. I know we say we do, but have you ever noticed that you came to Christ, you prayed the prayer, you went to church, it all fell apart. Eventually it got worse. Sometimes we left altogether, and then we start to come to Christ as we begin to deal with our pain. So we're first attracted to religion because religion empowers us to escape our pain, not have to look at our pain, use scriptures, confess positive things. Hey, I confessed it, you know, and there's a lot of good, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good postures out there. There's one called, I can't even pronounce it, Ho'oponopono. I can't pronounce it right, but it's a Hawaiian posture of whenever there's some self-hatred or a trigger in you, you turn and you say, I receive you, I embrace you, I love you, I forgive you. And that's a good beginning place. It's really a prequel to dealing with your emotional pain. But it's really good because if you don't have the prequel, you're gonna feel threatened by what you feel and want to put a facade and a proclamation and a prophetic word and a confession and a declaration to avoid or fight through what you think is happening externally that is actually targeting something internally. Okay. Hope. I still can't say it. Pono. All right. That one, Molly, exactly. I'm going to put that up there so the spelling, because I think you spelled it more correctly. That's what it's called, if you can pronounce that. And I love it because I got some good friends that are doing it. And I think that is where we have to start. Because if we're threatened by what we feel and we avoid it, we're never even going to get to the place of dealing with the conclusion about ourselves. Okay, see, everything done to you that made you feel fearful, alone, isolated, no good, not good enough, unworthy, unlovable, that reflects on your identity. And no matter how much you say at an intellectual level, I love you, I forgive you, all that does is posture you to begin a journey of facing yourself. If you stop there, it'll work for a while, and that's why you got to keep doing it repetitiously. It'll work for a while. It'll build a good intellectual habit to start to look at yourself, but it will not deal with the specific conclusions you have seen about yourself. And that's where we have to go deeper. And so, as long as you have a historical conclusion about yourself, back here. It doesn't matter what you're confessing about yourself right here. So in the present, I think it's this situation, okay? And so if I am targeting only the present where I need to love myself, but the present trigger is actually coming from a past conclusion of what I've decided about myself, I will clear out the surface, but eventually when it's going to be triggered again. But the process of dealing with the the how can I say it? The prequel posture, you know, is that it's not a threat to you and you can embrace that pain so that you can get back there to the past conclusion. When you deal with the past conclusion, you're not just letting go of that historical pain. You're also getting a new conclusion that is unlocking in you a present inheritance and purpose for why you walked through that in the first place that can now affect everybody in your life. So remember when it says in Ephesians that Ephesians 1 that it talks about that the riches of the glory and of the inheritance is in the saints. It's in each other, okay? The inheritance of who we are in Christ is hidden in the example of each other's journey that liberates us because we now know that this person was in my shoes. This person understands me. This person walked through this. And I now see how it was used in their life to bring them to the place of the freedom they're at now, and how all these painful situations are now being utilized for good through a right perception of themselves by removing the conclusion. Okay. And so unless you deal with the conclusion at the original lie of where it came in, you will only be scratching the surface with confession intellectually. We have to go from intellectual confession and objective truth into subjective experience where we can see all things becoming new, where we can see what does it say when we're born when we're born from above or awakened. It says this in 2 Corinthians 5. What does it say? That all things are now new, all old things have passed away, and all things are now of God. Now when we first come to Christ, we claim that, and all of a sudden it lasts. The honeymoon phase works out pretty good, and then and I want to put this up there. Nancy posted this because this is important. See, the Ho'oponopono prayer is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Very important. Very important. That's where we start, but that's not where we end. It's just where we start. That's one piece of the puzzle. This is why there isn't one way of doing it, but we need kind of a combination of different ways and different seasons that are helping us accordingly to what's being emphasized. There are processes out there that are frequency based, doesn't even deal with thinking or focusing in on memory, but it's in the nervous system because some emotion is trapped in the nervous system, even biologically. And so we use frequency based tools to deal with that. All right. But that is an echo of an emanation in our nervous system that is residue that's coming from a more pressurized place of conclusion. So wherever I conclude, I exclude myself from that conclusion. Okay, when it's trauma based. All right. Now, I've been working with trauma based people and working through my own trauma for 36 plus years of dealing with my own trauma, but really about 23 years of working with mine and others as well. And I've got thousands of hours of doing this with seeing tremendous results and also leveling up and learning new techniques and ways in which we do this. So of course, I'm nowhere going to conclude that the way I'm sharing it is the only way, or that I've even come to the fullness of what that looks like. I'm still growing in this. I don't know if we'll ever come to the end of how deep we can go and different ways we can process. All right. But it's kind of like you got to reformat your hard drive. If you have a computer and the computer, the program is split, it's, there's a virus, sometimes you can go in and you can remove the virus. Sometimes you just got to reformat the hard drive. And so this is what I'm talking about, reformatting. Reformatting without repetitious confession at an intellectual level to try to decree yourself out as though it's your present situation. Your present situation is never the source of your pain. There might be a present situation that is slapping you around, but the original slap is coming from a conclusion that is a memory that's meeting with the present confrontation. But because we haven't dealt with the past, we excuse our past and we project outwardly. This is how you know you haven't learned how to go inward, is when your present situation slaps you and you immediately retaliate in self-preservation outwardly, rather than realizing this is my memory reacting. This is not me responding out of spiritual freedom. Okay. All right. So let me read on just a little bit more here. So once we want to come to the unity of the faith, to the faith of the Son of God, the unity of the faith, verse 13, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. As a result, we are no longer children tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of people, by craftiness in deceitful scheming, but speaking the truth in love. Speaking the truth in love. Now, this is a big one here, because some people would say, if you have a healthy boundary, you've dealt with the trigger, you now recognize the trigger in somebody else, that somehow you should just keep your mouth shut, turn the other cheek, and keep energizing and justifying narcissistic behavior towards you. You probably still need to get healed if you're doing that. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and fight everybody or put them in their place. Choose your battles wisely, definitely. But until we actually start calling people on their crap, they're going to continue to think that they are justified to walk all over you. And that is not love. It is not love to sit there and be a welcome mat. Now, you can't really do anything about it till you deal with your own triggers. So when you deal with your own triggers, you can then respond. If it's a friend, it could be a misunderstanding. You could say, you know what? I don't think you understood where I was coming from here. Let's try this again. Now, I'm always for the mercy thing. I'm always for, let's communicate. Let's talk about this. What's really going on? But sometimes people don't want to talk to you when it's a problem they have with you. They want to go to everyone else. And when they do that, they try to pollute relationships. Now, again, if you feel the need, you have to try to justify yourself and go around and, no, don't listen to them. They're trying to blah, blah, blah. They're this, and you're retaliating the same. You're doing the same thing. But if you nip it in the bud by simply saying, excuse me, this is not going to be tolerated. This is not love. I'm not going to sit here and take your disrespect that's really towards yourself, that you're projecting on me. I'm going to tell you this is what you're really doing, and this is not going to end well for you. There's a consequence here. It's called, I'm going to move my space. And sometimes it comes down to exposing that person, and that's okay. It really is, because we eventually have to decide we're going to break this cycle, because anytime we just turn over, we just sweep it under the rug, is where we're either dealing with our own rejection and fear of what people will think about us, But we're also enablers at that moment, where we keep that cycle going and will never experience the oneness we claim we believe in. So if you believe we're all one, then let's start actually applying that at a relational level. It isn't going to happen because every time you curse me and sit there and slander me, or you know, whatever, that I just sit there and go, oh, I just bless you and love you. And there is a time for that. Don't get me wrong. There is a place for that, but it's not the only place. And I think if we just sit there and keep taking it, and that person thinks that they're right and they're justified, well, guess what happens? Not only do you get repressed and you don't have a voice, you now encourage the belief that you don't have a voice, which just embeds and engraves those past traumatic events deeper and justifies your need to protect yourself and to avoid confrontation and to be submissive in being beat up constantly. But it also will eventually build up until you freak out. And when you freak out, you're not going to freak out with healthy boundaries. You're going to freak out with doctrines. You're going to grab hold of the Bible because you don't have a voice. So you're going to try to get God to judge them. And so you'll start using hell or God's judgments, or that's why do you think Christians use doctrines to destroy each other? Why do you think they even believe in some of these doctrines that seem appealing and attractive to them? The doctrine of hell with eternal conscious torment is a man-made doctrine that many Christians want to try to weave into the scriptures to just really justify a hell they have created for others in their own mind, to justify the places in their life where they were unheard, they were beat up, and they couldn't say anything because Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Jesus said, just be beaten up. Okay. And that's actually not what Jesus said. Jesus gave those that had a slave mentality in captivity, who were subservient based on their idolatry. He gave them a starting place to turn the other cheek long enough to go inward and deal with their own stuff so they could learn to communicate. Okay. This is why we get down to the scripture here at the end of this chapter in Ephesians 4 that says, verse 25, actually, let's go to verse 25. Therefore, ridding yourselves of falsehood, speak truth to to each other. Speak each one of you with his neighbor. Speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, because we are parts of one another. Be angry and yet do not sin. In other words, be assertive, but don't operate out of a mistaken identity. Don't operate out of your trigger. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, and do not give place to the devil or to your ego, who's trying to project outwardly to excuse what you need to face. Okay? Do not give your ego that wants to project outwardly an opportunity. The one who steals must no longer steal, but rather he must labor, producing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with the one who has need. Do you see that your devil, the enemy of your mind, your Satan, your ego, okay, when all of these things are mirroring and triggering you, if you go inward, that outward situation now begins to work for you to renew you. It's now laboring on your behalf, not laboring against you. Okay. Goes on and it says in verse 29, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth. But if there is any good word for edification, according to the need of the moment, say that, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Now, giving grace to those that will hear has nothing to do with passive responses in being beat up. Okay. Sometimes people need to see that you're not going to react out of defending yourself in the beginning. so that they can start to become really surface the shame they're speaking of. Now, here's another thing. You really can't, you might outwardly try to shame somebody and they might see that you've shamed them. But if you're talking to adults, you actually can't shame anybody. You can only project your shame that attaches to where they relate in their undealt with shame. And this doesn't justify you shaming anybody, but this allows you to come out of the excuse, out of your own shame, to deal with your shame so that you can confront outside of shame somebody else's shame. And when they try to gaslight you and say you're shaming them, you can pretty much say, no, that's not true. And you can stand your ground in consistency of exempling true love. Okay. So an unwholesome word coming out of your mouth is coming out of a trigger that is there to retaliate. A wholesome word coming out of your mouth can be that which is obviously love-based, but not passive. Once you get to those next phases of deeper, real, accountable relationship, you're going to say, look, you know what? That's not who I am. I don't receive that label. I think this is something you're dealing with in your mind. And hopefully they will go inward. If they are a real friend, they will consider that friendship, and they will obviously try to see that, hey, this person has been good to me. This person hasn't tried to do anything. Most of my encounters with people resisting me are not in my close relationships. And those are the ones that hurt the most. But usually in my close relationships or in acquaintances, when it happens, there has been no argument. There has been no fight or striving prior to this outwardly. It's usually one person seething over something I said, and they won't communicate what they feel. They just let it build up, and they're having an argument with themselves in their mind as though we've been arguing, even though I have no idea what's happening. Okay. And so I'm thinking everything's great. And then one day they just flip out. It all comes out. And instead of going, I flipped out because you said something 6 months ago that I've just been turning over in my mind in an accusatory way and accusing you. And instead of going there, they just conclude that they've been fighting with you the whole time. And now they're just finally finished. And whatever you said in that last moment that just sent them over the top, they just come out with a retaliation. You're not of God, and I'm out of here. And most of the time, you don't even get that much respect. Most of the time, you don't even get enough honor and respect for them to come to you. Usually, they go to your other friends, and they start, trying to slam you to them. And yet you've never even had a negative conversation with them. There's never even been an argument to lead up to this. They've been fighting within themselves. And so what happens is they leave and they take off and they find somebody else, and maybe even one of your friends that has a similar thing. They find somebody else that will agree with their mindset because that other person has the same belief about themselves. So then they guard each other's pain and they call it grace and speaking love and mercy. And it's so dysfunctional. It's codependent. It's narcissistic. And what happens is they just keep breeding it and sending it around. So what happens to us that get left behind, we get beat up by this and we don't even know what happened. So we have to conclude, well, I guess I have to guess at what their problem was. We obviously know it was a trigger, but we let it go, right? They've moved on. We're not going to try to rock the boat. But yet nobody else deals with that situation in them. So what do? They just keep going around, dividing. And what they're dividing is all those that believe we're all one. And we're all teaching these teachings of being one. But we're never manifesting it because we will never confront the situation. So we've got to come up with some ways. And I'm not saying I've come up with all these ways, but I'm just saying we got to start somewhere. So how can we come up with ways in which to go from the, okay, I'm hearing you. I think there's a scripture somewhere in Timothy where it says um, that after the first and second admonition, reject such a person, seeing they are self-condemned. There's a scripture that says that. In other words, we always give somebody the benefit of the doubt in the beginning. Oh, you have a problem with me. Okay, well, let me know what it is. We should always be going inward. So go inward. We don't always know our own hearts. So the first thing we shouldn't do is justify any behavior that we might have done. We should definitely look at ourselves first. Uh, a healthy person goes inward and says, all right, are they mirroring something that I need to look at? If there's nothing there, we say, well, I don't really see it that way. Can you share with me some more about how you came up with this conclusion? Now, this is if the person is willing to share, but if they're coming off the wall with some, just absurd accusation that they've kind of conjured in their own minds, I guarantee you, most likely, they're not even going to come to you. They're going to go to everyone else. And at that point, there's nothing you can really do except confront them. And in that sense, you probably are going to confront them with some truth because you see what's going on. And that's where we need to tread lightly in one sense, but we also need to be able to be firm and to the point and consistent. I've learned to love myself at a place to where I don't care if you don't like me. I really don't care. It no longer affects me. You can slam me and go your way, and I will have a good night's sleep tonight. I will have great dreams. I won't have a secondary thought about you. Now back in the day, what I used to do was I had a couple different things that happened. If you beat me up back in the day, 25 years ago, um, I would be angry at you. I'd want to see retaliation. I'd want to see God get you. But see, I never really went around gossiping and slandering about people. So that's not my track record. I seen too much of that and how destructive it was. So I would just go inward and think bad thoughts about you. All right. And then I would then go from that into realizing how wretched I was for thinking those things. But see, the wretchedness I was feeling as self-condemnation wasn't coming from thinking those terrible thoughts about you. It was actually coming from the pain underneath that even wanted to think about those things in the first place. And so then I'd go into condemnation that I'm not worth being loved. And I would self-sabotage and self-condemn and all of that, okay? And that didn't produce any fruit in my life. It didn't help whatsoever. And I would just avoid those other people, okay? And so we learn avoidance techniques. We learn how to detach from people. We learn how to avoid. Um, but like you said, Deborah, people who do this seem so hypocritical to me. How to really see it? Well, what is a hypocrite? They're a play actor. Let me just say this: hypocrites don't know they're hypocrites because play acting is undealt with trauma. And it's undealt with trauma that I don't want to face. And so I put a scripture over it. I put a decree on it. I put a confession on it. I put an escapism on it. And I don't even know I'm doing it. So most people that are operating as hypocrites have not planned to be a hypocrite. They have not planned, they're not sitting there knowing that's what they're doing. Okay. So we need to understand this because what's the point of preaching oneness and not being able to live in it? What's the point? And so speaking the truth in love, um, there are multiple levels of that depending on where the relationship is at, depending on if it's inward towards yourself and where you're at, outward towards others and where you're at. So this is something that's really important. And then it says this, according to the need of the moment, this is still verse 29 of Ephesians 4, say what needs to be said in love, right? So that it will give grace to those who hear. Now, giving grace isn't giving people a free pass to abuse you. Okay? Giving grace is giving them a way out of the cycle of abuse. Isn't that amazing? See, we want to give people the right to abuse us, and we want to call that loving them, instead of giving them a way out of the cycle of abuse through confronting what they called love, which was really actually trigger-based hypocrisy. Okay? And so, now, Charlotte, you said something, because it's good. If you guys have questions or something, please put them up, or things that you've gone through, so that we can go deeper into this. All right. Charlotte, you said, I've had healthy people confront me, and my first thought was they had the problem in holding on to something I had done in the past. That is perfectly normal. Our triggers are going to think that, because why do you think we have a trigger? All right. What really is a trigger? Okay. A trigger is something that you concluded in the past about yourself that is not true about you, that has stored within that belief the emotional pain of that event. Okay. It's there. It's not a trigger yet, it's a conclusion. But as we go through life, we build uh, and reinforce that original belief with all these different other beliefs to protect that belief that justifies it. And then we use doctrines and all that once we come to religion. Okay. All right. And then somebody comes and they say or do something or confront something that they either see, or maybe they're sharing something about themselves. And immediately we don't hear what they're saying. We hear the trigger, but we don't know it's this thing back here. We just feel all this emotional pain rush up because our subconscious says, I've been here before, and it's learned to protect itself, and that's why it's called a trigger. Okay. And now that button is being pushed, but we don't see it as this past conclusion. We see it as this person is trying to confront me, and they're offended at something about me. Now, they very well might be offended. Who cares about them? Can you utilize this for you? Because if that trigger is exposed, you now at that moment have the opportunity to actually go within and find out where it's really coming from, what the real base belief is about yourself. So you have the base belief about yourself, and then you have the justified beliefs about what's wrong with everybody else in this childhood event, that now guards the base belief about yourself, so you don't have to look about yourself and you can project it outward, so you can start to feel powerful where you were powerless, or feel like rejecting them makes you feel better about not having to reject yourself. It's just a sick game we play in our own minds, and we're not aware we're doing it. Okay. And so this is something that's important. And so we go inwardly and we deal with the trigger. So a trigger is a smokescreen in the present that tries to convince you it's the other person's problem. But if you can posture and you can begin to realize your like the Ho'oponopono says, I love you, I forgive you, I receive you. That's the beginning process of going in and now being able to embrace that pain and go to the source and origin of where it's coming from. Okay. And so this is something that is really important when it comes to triggers. So when we finally experience the full-blown trigger in the present as adults, it is a stronghold in the mind that's been building up since we were children. All right. Let me go back here and read a little bit more here. So giving grace to somebody is pointing them to the way out of this dysfunction, not justifying their dysfunction by sweeping it under the rug and just being the welcome mat. Now, there is a time where you might have to have the fruit of long suffering and endurance. If you're working with somebody who constantly projects on you, but they come right back and say, oh man, I know that was my trigger. I'm sorry. I'm really trying to work through it. Give them grace. If they're willing and they're teachable and they've at least got to that stage, we don't need to be telling them, this is your stuff and you need to own your stuff. They can't yet. But If they are superior in their mind and it's all you and not them, you might have to be a little bit more assertive so that they actually get a revelation. Thank you for spelling that out, Nancy. Nancy's really helping me with my English today. Hanapono. Okay, hopefully I got it that time. All right. I'm just going to say the pono technique, the hana pono apono. Okay. And yes, there is a fine line. Okay. So let's keep going here. All right. So when it says here that once there is grace, um, it says, do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. I already said this earlier. You can't grieve spirit that's indestructible, that's one that sees the end from the beginning. God can't be hurt. He doesn't sit there with his own triggers, trying to get over the pain of what you've done wrong. He already knows everything you're going to do before you're going to do it. Okay? He isn't surprised. He isn't tripping out. So this isn't talking about grieving the Holy Spirit as this divine being that's outside of time and space, that's already, known the end from the beginning. This is talking about the one spirit that's mentioned earlier that's in us, through us, and it's in connection with the us or our humanity interpreting spiritual reality or who we are. Okay. And so don't grieve each other's filtered perspective of spirit. In other words, don't try to project on one another that now tries to stunt spiritual reality, because this is grieving to us, and we need to, instead of keeping the cycle going by ignoring it or projecting our own pain to justify our own pain by judging another in it, we need to be sensitive to what's really going on, read between the lines, follow the process, learn to posture, learn to go within, learn to hold accountable. So all of these are involved. The more accountable you are to your own belief system and using everything in the present to transmute your own belief system, and that's where it starts. Your present situation is not the source of your pain. It is an echo of the past. Follow the echo. Embrace it. Feel it. Look at what it is you believed about yourself in that lie, and then transmute it. Father, what is the truth you want me to know? And if you don't believe in a Father, Spirit, what is the truth you want me to know? What does my mind really believe about what is going on here? If you're an atheist, it works. If you're a Buddhist, it works. I don't care what religion you are and what you call it, whether it's source, energy, creator, God, Father, Spirit, whatever you need that helps you feel comfortable with where you're at, use the terminology and go in and say, now, what is the real truth here of where I believe this lie? What's really going on here? And what is the truth I need to hear that will help me let go of what I've held against myself? You'll get the truth. Because it's already in you. It's all already in you at a subconscious level. Your eternal origin is hidden within the subconscious. But also on top of that subconscious is the lenses of conclusion in your human experience where there's been trauma or the absence of good things, where you've concluded less than who you are. Okay? And so we have to realize that don't grieve one another, and don't twist who you truly are spiritually through just throwing triggers at each other. All right? And then it says this, that it says, do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. So you're sealed. In other words, who you are as spirit isn't touched by any of this situation, which gives you a little bit more confidence to go inward. You're looking at the mindset. Paul said, it's not I that sin, but sin that dwells in me. So again, mistaken identity being sin is you being able to separate who you are from what you believed about who you are, and then focusing in on the belief so that you can transmute it without feeling threatened. This allows you to let go of walls, okay, so that you can get to the pain. Has anybody ever tried to go deep and you get stuck? All right, you're going to get stuck because you don't have just one mindset. You're trying to get to that base belief. This is what I really believe about me when I feel this. I'm nothing. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy of love. That's the place you're getting to. But to get to that, you have to go through some secondary things. You're going to have to work through these blocks that are self-justified that have been working for you to manage your pain, coping skills. We need to get to the place where we don't need to cope. Coping skills are performance-based pain management tools that don't set you free at an emotional level. They just enable you to try to keep your head above the water so you don't die. And so again, they become denials when they stop working. They end up becoming denials and roadblocks in which we repress memory. And so as long as we have repressed memory, we are justified to make our triggers somebody else's problem. All right. So avoiding the pain, and I can say this, you can sit there and be in pain all day and throw a fit and you're still avoiding the pain. You can sit there and roll it over in your mind and accuse others and accuse yourself and say you're a worthless piece of you know what, and you're still avoiding the pain. Facing your pain is realizing what's really going on. You haven't even gotten to what you believe about yourself or what pain you're even feeling. You just realize that the pain you're feeling is not coming from the present situation, even if that other person's a jerk. It's that person being a jerk is your deliverer for you to face yourself in a pain that's coming from the past. Once I get that part down as that's what's really going on, now I can begin the journey of facing my pain, because the moment I begin to face it, guess what's going to come into my mind? All the past justifications that allowed me to escape it in the first place. So anything you justified in your own mind way back here is going to surface. You say, well, when I look back there from my intellect as an adult, I was a kid. My parents were trying the best they could. It really, wasn't as bad as I thought. I was just a kid. Of course it felt worse as a kid. And so we go into this denial and then we go, yeah, Father, I just love myself and I've already forgiven. So I just let go of it and we move on. And guess what happens? A few months later, somebody comes, does the same thing that this other person did. And all of a sudden we're right back where we were. Well, I thought I dealt with that pain. I thought I faced myself. No, you didn't face yourself. You faced your denials and then couldn't go any further. And those denials were justifying it, because you as an adult looking back is always going to justify, because your intellect has learned to survive what your emotions believe. And so being able to disarm that, very important. Start asking yourself questions. Well, what does it feel like that for them to do that to me or for me to take it lightly? What does that feel like to not have any validation? Let go of what your intellect is trying to convince you of when you're trying to focus in on emotional belief. Your intellect is going to defend it. It's learned how to defend it. Okay? Because if you start to go from looking back as an adult at your childhood experience into living in the present childhood perspective of that experience, looking through the eyes of your childhood, you're going to see a whole different view of what you believe. So looking back is one part, but you got to go from looking back as an adult to your childhood through evaluation to reliving the moment as a child through that lens. And that's where you begin to realize, oh, wow, this is the lie I really believed. There is no justification for what they did. I have been accepting other person's abuse as my identity, and now it's time to face that. And when you face it, you're going to be mad at them. When you face it as an adult looking back, especially if you've already apologized or there's already been forgiveness at an intellectual level with your parents and reconciliation. The last thing you want to do is feel like you've dishonored them by digging up your childhood memory that's being triggered, where you don't respect what they did. And you think somehow you're disrespecting them now. That is a lie, and that is denial. You're not disrespecting them now. You're going into the emotional belief, and you're dealing with the childhood version of you that's still offended and that hasn't had closure. And that part of you is more important than your adult self thinking you're hashing things, you're just bringing things up. Okay. So you're going to have this battle at different layers as you work through questioning yourself. So that's why it's good to look through your adult self looking back and then look through your child self in the event, because it's there you're going to start to feel it. Well, I just feel like they weren't there for me. They didn't love me. They didn't care. My mom just sat and let it happen to me. She was in denial. So what do you do with that? Well, now, Father, what is the truth that I need to see here about why my mom sat back and let this happen to me and didn't protect me and defend me? What was going on in her that would cause her to do that? I want to see what was going on in her from your perspective, not just what happened to me because she wasn't doing what I believe she needed to do. All of a sudden, you just start getting this revelation that, wow, nobody defended her. She was afraid that something was going to, that she felt inadequate, that she wasn't even capable of being a good mother. Wow. Well, I don't really feel like she wasn't protecting me now. Now I feel like she was the one that was unprotected in her childhood. Wow. All of a sudden, forgiveness happens. I didn't have to pray a prayer. Oh, God, I forgive this person. Those intellectual prayers only go intellectually deep. And all of our problems are not intellectual, they're emotional. Okay? That's where the pain is. And so it's at that place that all of a sudden you didn't have to pray a prayer. You released the debt because you saw their own pain and you saw that it was not intentional, but that it was out of their own lies they had believed. Now compassion comes. That's forgiveness. And all of a sudden you look and you go, well, I really don't feel, overlooked or powerless anymore based on what I thought my mother wasn't doing that she should have. So now one lie just automatically breaks off. And then all of a sudden you begin to feel again, well, yeah, but my dad, he did this to me and he didn't love me. Well, Father, what was it? What was going on in him and why he did? This is not justifying their behavior. This is revealing the heart of why people do what they do out of their pain. Then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wow, I've done those same things to people of what my dad did to me, because he did it to me. And it was, and you all of a sudden you begin to realize, well, I remember when grandpa, how he would throw a fit and get upset and put my dad down in front of me. And now I see, oh, wow, look what he went through. So now compassion comes. And then we simply begin to ask, now, Father, who is, and it's, who am I in this place where this happened to me and I adopted this about myself? What's the truth? So you're doing it at the levels of the offender or the one that did it to you, and at the level of what you accepted about yourself in the midst of that. And you watch. Once that is transmuted, start going to these secondary memories. You might even start it out with those. You might, when you started focusing, now, Father, can you take me to where this came from? You don't have to look for it. Your mind will bring it up. Oh, yeah. Well, in college, I remember when this happened. And you'll go there and you'll feel the pain, but you won't be able to get any freedom there. It'll just stir it up and bring perspective until you get back to the place where you adopted the belief. And you're going to do all the work there. And you're going to go back to this college memory or whatever secondary memory it is. And guess what? You're going to look at it and go, yeah, there's no pain there now. And I didn't even have to deal with that memory. You're going to come to the present and you're going to focus in on everything that happened that started this whole thing. And you're not going to even have a problem with the present anymore. The whole present is taken care of no matter what another does, because you used what another did as your deliverance from your own past conclusion about yourself. Okay. This is called renewing the mind. All right. You cannot renew the mind by scripture memorization, by positive thinking, by confession, or decrees in and of themselves. You cannot renew the mind. You can prepare yourself to face yourself by some of those things if you know you need to face yourself after your confession. But if you think your confession is enough and you are using your confession out of a fear of facing yourself, then your confession will simply repress the pain until you can no longer hold it back and somebody around you really gets hurt, because it all builds up and begins to come out through violence, through anger, through all of these protective mechanisms we use to keep our pain at bay. Does that make sense? So this is something that's really important. And once we kind of realize this, and that's where we get to the verse, put away, you're dealing with all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and slander must be removed from you, along with all malice or malicious behavior. Be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. This isn't about God forgiving you. I give you another chance. Don't screw up again. That ain't forgiveness. Forgiveness here is dealing with the Christ within you, which is the true version of you, um, now taking preeminence over the false version of you that's been accepted as the truth. So once I transmute the lies I have believed about myself, who I truly am as spirit becomes the center of my belief about myself. And because of that, I'm no longer being malicious or bitter, wrathful or angry, and I'm not slandering. You'll notice slander is right there in the midst of wrath, anger, and clamor. Why? Because when I hate myself, when I'm mad at myself, when you know, when I'm bitter at myself and at my history and what's been done to me in my childhood, I will slander you when you push that button. That's what it's saying there. I will attack you to protect myself. And I really wanted to focus today on slander and gossip, because most of us have been put in that position and have been brainwashed by slanderers. And by the way, slander starts with self-slander. So wherever I slander myself by believing a lie about myself is where I'm going to slander others who hit that button where I've slandered myself and conclude on myself. And I will now slander them to protect my own self-slander. And I will just keep perpetuating this. And so because we've been brainwashed by pastors who secretly slander themselves in self-condemnation and under the law of condemnation, and using their doctrines to protect their pain and try to project some spiritual facade because they're afraid of what people might truly believe about them if they find out what they believe about themselves at an emotional level. Because of that, they have twisted the teachings of grace. They've twisted the teachings of love. They've twisted the teachings of, when it comes to correction, it's either extreme one direction or another. And so we can't actually communicate properly. So we're needing to go back to square one and learn how to communicate, to where we're not moving out of this lie that if I confront you and tell you that that's bull what you're doing, and you need to look at yourself, that doesn't mean that I'm operating in a trigger. Now, it can mean that I am, and I guess it really just depends on my track record. If I've looked within, and all my close relationships and my marriage and what everybody closest to me can say about how I am to them, because that becomes your feelers to what spirit you're operating in or what mindset you're operating in. So I can't justify myself just by myself. There's a lot of things involved here, but I need to get to the place to where I can speak to somebody else, because here's the thing. You can speak the most loving things in the right heart to somebody, and they can still attack you and call you all kinds of things and gaslight you. So should you then decide that you must not have been speaking in love? Not at all. You could have very well been speaking in love, but somebody else was projecting and gaslighting. They're going to do what they're going to do. Don't stop confronting in love. People need to be confronted. And if we all got on the same page, when and people know this, I did a post yesterday on it. I said, look, I get people doing this to me all the time. It doesn't bother me anymore. It really doesn't. Most of the time, I don't even confront. I just go my way. But sometimes I will confront. You won't see me naming names online. That's why, we had a situation at the Fam Bam where we had a couple show up that had just recently slandered my wife and I. And somebody had invited them because nobody knew, because I don't voice it, and I don't go around trying to destroy people's character, but these people were trying to destroy our character. And I went up to them and I said, look, these are people that I poured into for four years. That the moment, and all I did was love them and pour into them and all of that. And the moment I brought a corrective word and said, look, I'm watching how you're manipulating, yourselves and manipulating others. And I'm seeing the fruit of some situations here that could be avoided if you'll focus on this. Now, I thought they knew my heart since I had laid my life down for them and loved them and given them all my time and my effort and everything for years. And of course, everything they said prior about me and to me about that was just, oh, we love you. You're here for us. Never been an issue. Now, all of a sudden, there's an issue. Because they had reached that point of so much self-deception and using the oneness message to avoid their pain, and turning it into a doctrine. They had now arrived and knew everything the Spirit was telling them and didn't need anybody to tell them anything. So they went out attacking us. And, in that situation, all of a sudden they show up at the Fam Bam. Well, I'm an all-inclusion guy. But this is a oneness gathering. This is not a oneness teaching with a demonstration of codependency and allowing the opposite of oneness in the gathering. So I confronted. Well, we were invited. Well, guess what? I'm the one hosting this meeting, and I'm the one that you wanted to attack. So are you ready to face that? And we'll take a moment. And if you're ready to face that with me, own your own crap, be accountable. Changing your mind is also about making restitution. I don't need your apology because I'm hurting. I need your apology so I know that your mind is shifted and you're not here to bring division. You've got to change mine and you're now ready to deal with your stuff. That's all I'm about. I'm about healthy interaction. Well, these people weren't willing to do that. They wanted to just continue. And so I said, well, there's the door. Was I mean and bitter for showing them the door? No. I was like, it's time for you to stop doing this to yourself and to others. And I'm going to be the point of contact to make sure it is resisted. Because you're not going to, with your kids, back to the kids. If I allow my children to go beat up on other children and I sweep it under the rug, I certainly am not a good parent. I'm not going to sit there and just, well, they're just kids, or, they'll outgrow it, or no, they won't outgrow it. They'll now believe that this is the thing I can do. I'm now been given license to do this. No, you do correct a child when they do that. And if you're going to act like a child and fight each other and put each other down, then you're a child and need to be treated like a child. Simple as that. You act like a child toward me, I'm going to treat you like a child. I'm not going to do it out of some sarcastic place. I'm going to do it out of, how can we get through this? Okay. I'm all for restoration and restitution being made. And so I had to do that, and it was a tough thing because I love these people and I have nothing against them. And the moment their mind shifts and they're willing to own their stuff and make their trigger about them, I will be happy to fully embrace them and they can come and be a part of any gatherings I do. No problems at all with that. I don't hold grudges and I don't care. I don't have walls toward people. And because of that, I will hold you accountable. But I'm not in your business neither, but the moment you enter my space and try to disrespect me, I'm going to love myself in that space. And I'm not going to compromise my own love for myself because I can't love you unless I love myself. So we've got to come to a place where we're willing to deal with this. And so, in this situation, and that happened, at the Fam Bam, and a lot of people were tripping out in the beginning. And unfortunately, I had to share with a few because they were there. In general, without going into details, just like I shared here, that look, that's not tolerated in my space. I create my own world. We all talk about, well, you create your own world. That's right. And I am creating my own world where, narcissists and codependent mindsets are not in it. And I will help bring restoration. I'm a restorer of streets to dwell in. And those streets are what? Those are pathways in the mind, perception-based pathways that need to be restored. And those are the streets we dwell in. We dwell in the streets of our own conclusion. We dwell within the streets of our own emotional experience. And so, I will resist that. And I'm okay if you hate me for it. I'm quite okay with it. It's all right. You don't really hate me, you hate yourself. And it's only the emotional belief that hates itself, not who you truly are. And so be free to do that, but just make sure you're focusing in on your own stuff first. All right. And do that. I mean, I don't think I need to go to the extreme. I used to go to this extreme where I still had triggers where I would literally just name people. I would do what Paul did, where he would name Philetus and Hermogenes or whatever. I forget their names. They had some weird names there in scripture, but it talks about those that were handed over to Satan so they might learn not to blaspheme. Okay, they were handed over to their own devices, and Paul would name people in scripture and he'd say, here's an example of what not to be. They just had so much community-based focused stuff there that they would just call people out right in their meetings. I mean, in fact, if you were a leader in those days and you were being a hypocrite, you were called right out in front of everybody, probably stood up in front of everybody and told that you're a hypocrite. Okay. And it was like, it's time to change your ways. Now, the problem is I don't think they had the understanding of emotion in those days. So it was still very legalistic and shaming and performance-based. So we've done away with the public shaming of naming people. And instead we ramble on about it, in a post or in a video. And I'm not saying that I'm rambling on about my own because I don't really care what people think. I'm sharing past experiences that I am now using as, okay, how can we take this example and find a way to actually promote the unity of the faith, to come into maturity, to get past the whining and the slandering and the gossiping and the poor pitiful me and crap in our drawers, and getting out of the diaper stage and coming into maturity to where can we argue and come to a conclusion of truth and still walk together? Can we do that? Can we speak the truth in love? Can we recognize that my freak out is my freak out that I can't put on you, even though you might have initiated my freak out? Can we do that long enough to deal with the freak out internally so that when we communicate back, we can go deeper in a real bond? No, get rid of the trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is where I stay in relationship with you based on the drama that feels comfortable because my whole life has been drama and I've been living out of this repressed trauma. Okay. So healthy relationships feel very uncomfortable when I have only known my security through trauma and drama. Okay. Can I face that and come out of that so that through my confrontation and honesty with after I face that and transmute it, and now we're working together with each other's trauma and drama, can we see it for what it is so that we can now begin to build healthy bonds through being triggered together, but going within and working together through those triggers to create real bonds that are healthy. And I'll tell you what, I've had some people in my life where we both could not stand each other. Some of the people I could not stand in my life became good friends to me. Once I got past using them as my scapegoat for my own pain, I was able to go within and deal with it and then confront them and help them go within and deal with it. And you know what? Our relationship became so much deeper to where it didn't matter if somebody else was traumatized, was triggered and was trying to go around and separate us and get them on their side. They're really like, no, man, we're one. I know Brian. He knows me. We've walked through hell together. We've triggered each other, but we postured, we went within. And in that, we bonded deeper. We know each other. There ain't nothing you can say or do to make me suspicious of him. And so I'm telling you, this is the way. This is where iron sharpens iron. So if when you're projecting on each other, you can take some of these postures, put them into practice, what's going to happen is, because this is exciting. Can I just say this is exciting? You know why this is exciting? Because you cannot deal with your triggers intellectually. Even if you remember all the hell that you went through and you have all the answers of why they did what they did to you and what the truth is, according to scripture and what you've been told and what your intellect says, you can't cross over there and transmute them. You can't do it. You have to time travel through re-experiencing the pain in order for it to change your experience. You can't change your experience without being in the experience. No, you can't look at your experience back here and intellectually throw knowledge at it. You just can't do it. That's denial. We don't want to feel the pain. It sucks. I get it. But if you will use the trigger to feel it, translate into your past, because in your past, you're still alive and well there. It's called a metamorphic lie. Something that happened to you that was true, but you got away. You've moved on with your life physically, but emotionally, you're still there. You're still living that lie. So you have to feel it. It was once true, but it's no longer true, but your mind believes it's still true. And therefore, everything is presently triggering you is saying it's still true, but you don't remember that because you've repressed it. So you make it all about this person being your enemy. Okay? If you can take this posture and say, oh, I've got to feel this, not think it. I got to feel this. And now, Father, take me to the place where I first believed this. And it's just going to pop right up. Memories are immediately going to be, oh, yeah, okay, I see a pattern here. And that's where you transmute it. You can actually bond with that person that did that because they became your deliverer. Because here's the thing, how quickly after we get triggered have we learned to talk ourselves out of what we feel? To pray ourselves out of it, to prophesy ourselves out of it, to go get a prophetic word, to go vent and get somebody to agree with us so we can get that trigger to come back down again. What happens when we do that? Well, the trigger hides. Trigger hides, you can't access it. You just lost your opportunity. You can only deal and transmute your past conclusions about yourself when you're in the trigger. The moment the trigger hides, you got to wait for somebody else to trigger you, or you have to be able to sit and focus until you can trigger yourself and go there. Many times it's really hard to re-trigger yourself when you try to do it because you think you're faking it and your mind won't believe you're actually triggering yourself. It'll think you're just making it up and you'll have all these other denials. Okay. So you want to feel. We've been taught to avoid the feelings. Feel the feelings. Okay, why are you threatened by an emotion that has nothing to do with your present, but is back here where your mind won't let go of it? If you can get that, and that's where I think Ho'oponopono, whatever that is, that's where I think that works, is getting you past the fear of facing yourself so that you can begin to go deeper and then take it into this shift, which is what I do, and begin to transmute. And what is amazing about that is you're not just getting rid of pain. You're changing your whole historical journey and the purpose why you journeyed through it, which now begins the release. Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono. There it is. I think I got it right this time. All right. So that's what it's doing. All right. And so it's setting you up so it's not a threat, so you can venture in to your mind. In my Father's house are many mansions, and you can go into the mansions of your mind, which is the Father's house, and you can begin to get rid of that old furniture, upgrade the house, upgrade the rooms, right? Fill it with beautiful things, as it says in Proverbs, that wisdom fills the house with beautiful things, with beautiful furniture, you know? And what happens is your past pain now becomes your present platform for the proof of goodness, grace, and glory, the proof of your purpose. It now begins to reveal to you who you're sent to. It now gives you a bridge of relatability because you've discerned why you went through what you went through. And you're now carrying a higher frequency of grace and love without judgment that allows people to approach you in their own pain and to be able to face themselves in their own triggers. This is why when people come to me, they say, Brian, you're just like, you just carry this revelation of love and acceptance. I mean, I can get on here and ramble and complain and people feel loved. I know it sounds out there, and I'm not trying to ramble and complain, but there's honey on my voice to sweeten the correction I bring is sweetened because I'm not speaking out of condemnation, because I went in and I dealt with the pain and there's no judgment. And so I ain't here to judge anybody, man. I'm right here with you guys. I'm like, yeah, been there over and over and over again. And because I don't judge myself, how am I going to judge you? Can't judge you. There's nothing to judge. I can only judge you where I've judged myself wrong, in a wrong way. Now, where I've discerned or judged myself in the right way, I can discern and judge you in the right way. In other words, I can judge all things. What did Paul say? Judging all things, but not rightly being judged. In other words, he was showing the difference between those that were blind to their own pain and were projecting, and himself, who had dealt with his own past pain and was discerning correctly. Okay. And what does it say? When you eat the meat, it's by reason of use that you have your senses exercised to discern good and evil. Okay. The evil I have received as who I am, and the good of who the Father was for walking me through that for the sake of others to unlock their inheritance through your journey. Okay, there's just so much glory in this. So grab the trigger when it's happening, and make deals with each other when you're not triggered. If you got friends, make a deal with them. Say, look, there's going to come a time I'm going to probably say or do something that's going to trigger you. And I might say it out of truth, and I might say it out of my own trigger. Can we make an agreement together? Can we make a covenant that when we piss each other off and want to end the relationship, can we do this process together? Can we experiment? This isn't about protecting the relationship. This isn't about justifying ourselves or the other person. This is just simply about an experiment of, let's see if we can go in and renew our minds by speaking the truth in love, by directing each other to focus in on each other's pain. My wife and I, we do this. I know I've gone over the time. It's probably one of the longest videos I've done in a while. I just feel this is really important to finish this correctly. My wife and I, and I'll finish with this, my wife and I, our first couple years of marriage was hell. And it was mainly hell because I'll put all the blame on me. It was really me. She might have had her issues, but her issues were not aggressive. Me, I was trying to get her to reject me. And I didn't even know I was trying, but outwardly, that's what was really happening. Because I had this fear of, I'd been hurt by women. So the moment my heart was open to her because of love, all the pain began to surface where I had previously opened my heart and had been wounded and hurt and judged. So anything she said to me to redirect me was taken as, X is judging me. But I couldn't see it at the time, even though I had gone through some inner healing and mind renewal in this area. I had kind of thought I had arrived at some point and had thrown that to the side. So I wasn't exercising this posture at the time. And so everything was taken as a judgment. And therefore, I had to have a rebuttal. I had to have protection. I had to have justification. And so finally, it dawned on me that's what I was doing again. So we started implementing what we knew at the time, which is what I'm sharing now, but not as deep as how I'm sharing it now. See how far we've come. And we made a deal. When we weren't triggered, we said to each other, all right, every time you say, and this is the basis of it, if you say something that's off and you are completely out of line, but it triggers me, I am not going to hold you accountable for what you just did, at least while I'm in the trigger. I'm going to lay that aside, my need to correct you, even if you're wrong, because believe me, triggers are always looking to avoid themselves to correct another. And if I'm triggered, I'm going to be aware of that. And and you're going to help me go inward. And we're going to go in and we're going to deal with, and you're going to help me go through that. In other words, this is a hard one, people. The one who just hurts you, you're going to realize that they're your deliverer, and you're going to allow them to now walk you through a process. You're going to allow your supposed abuser, that's abuser in your eyes, to now lead you into healing. Now, that's a hard place to be. It's going to take some practice, because a part of your mind is going to say, hell no, that person just hurt me. That's the last person I want to talk to or open my heart to. What are you going to do at that point? You're going to focus in. What does it feel like to allow that to happen? What does that feel like? To allow the person who abused me to come right back into my heart and dig around in my own pain. What does that feel like? Well, that feels like I'm going to be used and abused even more. Now, focus in on that. All right, when I'm used and abused even more, what do I believe about myself? Not intellectually. Intellectually, my belief is I'm the righteousness of God. I'm more than a conqueror. I shall not do any of these. No. Emotionally, what do I believe? Oh, wow. I believe I'm just completely powerless and there's just no way out. Something's going to come up. It could be hopelessness, powerlessness. All right, focus on that first. Now, Father, can you take me to the place where I first believed I was hopeless and powerless and there was no way out? Because right now my mind is justifying why I shouldn't face that based on these intellectual reasons that are really protection reasons. Okay? Learn to talk to yourself. If you can't communicate with yourself, don't expect to be a good communicator with others. And so, get to the place where if you have to do a couple layers of thinking and to get that out of the way, so you can actually allow the offender to minister to the offended in this process, especially if you're spouses. And so that's what we did. And we would do it to each other. Now, what I found was I never felt I needed to go back and correct my wife when she was off if I was triggered. Once the trigger was healed, it was like, who cares? I don't even care if you were to repeat that anymore, because I'm no longer triggered, so it doesn't matter to me. I don't feel unloved, because the only place I feel unloved is towards myself. Nobody can make you feel unloved as an adult. As a child, you adopt the belief of being unloved, and you're constantly now thinking the present person isn't loving you. Okay. But once you deal with that lie and you love yourself, nobody can make you feel anything. That's what's great about it. You're completely free. It's maintenance free. And you don't ever have to go back and keep confessing it. Once the conclusion is dealt with and the truth comes in, it's maintenance free in that area. You might have 50 other areas, but that area is free. But I've also been in situations where I wasn't triggered, and my wife would say something that would have triggered me before. And because we already walked through it, I would be able to say, honey, that's a trigger. Let's focus in on that. And you know what I would find? I would find that she would do it. The trigger would subject itself to the process. Now, what's crazy is I tried saying that while I was triggered, even with a monotone voice, and she could not receive it. because the sound of my trigger was still coming through my monotone voice. The sound of my self-protection was heard in her trigger, and she couldn't open it up. So there is a sound within your sound. See, I understand demeanor and, what is it? 80-something% of our communication is our body language. But let's say you've learned to have a poker face, and we've all done this. Those that have learned to repress really well can believe one thing in their heart, but present another thing on their face, right? So we've learned how to master lying to ourselves and lying to others, okay? So I was really good at that. So I had learned how to not wear my expression on my face, what I really felt. So I could, at a level, counsel people when I was triggered, but they wouldn't know it. And so they could receive at an intellectual level some instruction. But I tell you what, when somebody is feeling the pain and you try to put on that facade of, out of a lie, you're really offended, but you're going to present that I'm just going to love you through this and I forgive you and let me help you. But really deep inside, you're seething, trying not to show them. They hear that no matter how good of a poker face you put on, because once emotion is open and you've let go of intellect and you're trying to receive ministry in that emotion, you will hear the other person's emotional intention behind their poker face. Okay. And you're very, very true. Let me kind of put that up there for people to see, Nancy. So good. Vibrational sounds have a loud and clear message. Your vibrational sound is a higher level of communication than verbal speech. And your verbal speech carries the intention of your heart hidden behind it. And anybody that opens their emotions, even if it's a trigger, a lie-based emotion, their lie-based emotion will not trust your lie-based frequency that's hidden behind a truth to set you free. You can't do it. Okay. I think we're all busted, Charlotte. I see how you put up there. Oh, busted. Yep. We're all busted in this. We've all done it. We've all learned to do it because that's how we were taught to do it. It's okay. It's okay. There's a way through this. There's nothing wrong with anything you've walked through once you realize this truth and you begin to transmute it. It's not about anybody purposefully trying to do anything to anybody. We've been just shadow boxing and beating each other up from a shadow of our own past, thinking that something's really going on when we're just being given a constant, continual opportunity to face our past. Can you now see why we keep going through cycles? It's not because we're being punished by God or we're not doing it all right outwardly. It's because the Father's never going to give up on your redemption. He's never going to give up on your mind's renewal. It will constantly come full circle to give every opportunity for you to face yourself so you can be free from the emotional belief about yourself. Okay. But it all starts in our present, and you can't decide, well, I need to be healed of this. I know many of you are probably thinking about different places in your life you know need to be healed. Don't evaluate that. You won't be able to get to it. You'll just intellectually trick yourself. Okay? And you'll end up only doing an intellectual version of this, which won't get to the source of your pain experientially. Throw away your hypothesis and your interpretation psychologically of what you think you need to be healed from. Use only the present situation. The present situation knows exactly the emotional part of your mind that can no longer manage the pain through its previous methodology of survival techniques. Your survival techniques will only last so long. So when stuff starts to surface and you push it down one place and it keeps popping up, and you're in one of those seasons where life ain't working for me like it was in the last season. I'm in the valley. I'm no longer on my mountaintop. Most of our mountaintops are intellectual conclusions that feel good to avoid emotional pain, which leads us to another valley. But once our valleys are surfaced and exalted, then all of our heavenly experiences become practical, and we begin to what? Walk on level ground. We're no longer up and down. We no longer need to get somewhere to escape something. Okay, we begin to face everything, and everything levels out in consistency in our emotions and our spiritual perception and all of this, so you can't really decide which trigger needs to be healed. You can only recognize the present situation in which you can no longer control yourself. And that area where you're out of control is evidence that that part of your emotional mind is actually ready to face the pain. I have done sessions on people where intellectually they said, yes, I want to be healed. I've been thinking about this situation, and I know it's connected here. So we'll go there. And we'll get to a point, but their mind will not allow them to get there. And it's like, all right, focus in on that. Well, for some reason, what do you feel? Well, I feel angry. Angry is what anger is a denial. It's an escapism, and it guards the mind, okay, from dealing with some of the other issues like abandonment and invalidation and shame and these kinds of things. So you got to get past the anger mechanism in order to get to the actual root belief system. And we learned anger to escape the pain, because anger, even though outwardly can become aggressive, it can also deny. So I can be, let's use this. Do you ever have a spouse that gets angry with you and shuts down and avoids you? It's not outward aggressive anger. It's silent, non-emotional anger. Okay. It's called punishment, right? Well, that's how we punish ourselves emotionally. So we can have anger that's outward aggressive. It can punish somebody outwardly by silence, but what it does inwardly is it numbs you from the pain. It allows you to feel like you're justified. It gives a level of validation emotionally, but not enough to heal it, but just enough to deceive you at a deeper level to not have to face it. Okay. And so this is what's happening in the mind, right? But there are times where I've said, focus in on the anger. Are you willing to give up your right to be angry to get to the source of your pain? They will say yes. Then I'll have to say, all right, what does it feel like to not have the right to use your anger to protect this pain of abandonment over here? What does it feel like to let go of that right? What does your mind believe will happen if you can't protect your pain using this anger? And they will say, well, I feel like I'll be permanently stuck in this, that I'll never escape, or that I'm unsafe, or that there'll be injustice. And there's multiple reasons why. Because, see, you can ask them, are you willing to give up the right to their anger? You can skip the other questioning. They'll say yes 100% of the time. All right, go ahead and give that over to God and let me know when it's gone. A few minutes later, they'll say, okay, I've let it go. I want you to go ahead and focus on this fact that you were abandoned and that they didn't care about you. All the things they previously said before the anger revealed itself. I said, now, what do you feel? Guess what they're going to feel? I feel angry. Well, I thought you gave up your right to be angry. Mind won't allow you to do it. Intellectually, you wanted to give it up. Your emotional mind said, hell no, we ain't going there. You have no choice. You don't get to choose when your emotional belief is ready to be healed. Okay, this is really important to get this, because this will help lift a lot of frustration of why you haven't been able to why forcing your freedom doesn't work. Okay. And so this is why it's important to ask the question, what does it feel like to not have the right to be angry? Now, when you initially say that, people say, well, if I didn't have the right to be angry, I'd feel great that it was gone. But that ain't the question. The question is, this anger's been guarding the pain. It is your escape. What does it feel like to not have any escape and you have to face that pain? What does your mind believe is going to happen? Well, that emotional pain is a childlike belief. And that childlike belief says, I'm unsafe, nobody cares. Well, that's what it feels like. Feels like nobody cares and I'm unsafe and I ain't ever escaping it. So in order to escape it, I had to be angry. But if I let go of my anger, I ain't ever going to escape it. So now you got the lie that's protecting the lie. And now you simply say, now, Father, is that true? If so-and-so lets go of the right to be angry, will they be unsafe? Will they be stuck in this forever? In this memory back here that they've already moved on from in life, but emotionally is still there? God's going to say, I'll go with you. you won't be stuck there forever. The mind relaxes. Instantly, the anger's gone without you letting go of it. It's crazy. I've seen this thousands of times. Now, I've also seen, not all the time, but enough times, where that person all of a sudden, well, God did say he's willing to take it, and I believe it, but part of me doesn't really want to let go of it. Part of me feels like, I've really come to find security in it. All right. Now, at that point, we can try another method, and that is, now, Father, can you take them to the place where they began to use anger? Because you might still be in the present. You might be in a secondary memory and not be at the base memory. This is all a gamble of guessing games until the mind reveals itself. So you ask questions until it takes you here and there, and it starts to paint a picture and make it clearer. But once you're there, if you just ask the Father, now, can you take them to the place where this person learned to use anger to protect themselves? You might end up in another memory, shed some more light that helps the mind release itself. But I've had times where the person says, you know what, I just can't feel this pain. I can't go any further. This is too much. Now, it's only too much because the emotions believe they can still manage the pain. Not because they're too much. Because you've been experiencing that pain all the time. You've just been beating yourself up on the inside without actually focusing it in a direction that actually heals you. So we're constantly feeling that emotional pain. We have just learned how to repress it, to ignore it, and all of that. Okay? And so there are times where your emotional mind says, nope, my way has been working great. This repression, this outward projecting, this accusing, my doctrines of demons have worked really great for being a victim to devils and demons and being a victim to this pastor who did this to me and this parent who, or this person that did this to me. It's working great. Okay. And so it won't let you in. So why is this connected to the present situation? And that is because the present situation that you can't escape, even if the circumstance changes, that same thing that keeps coming around, looking a little bit different, but it's really targeting the same thing. That's whittling away at the emotional belief system's methodology of pain management until that emotional belief can no longer manage its pain. And when there's enough walls removed there and you're flipping out, intellectually, you've known for years you wanted to be free. Emotionally, you haven't been able to get there. But now you're ripe for harvest. Now all of a sudden you go in because the pain has gotten strong enough that your emotional mind says, all right, my pain management tools ain't working anymore. Come help me out. And that's when your intellect can cooperate with your emotion and you're simply allowing yourself to feel the pain, go in and deal with this pain. So I hope that this message today has encouraged you. I hope that you've gotten some revelation out of this, some postures, and go back, listen to this as many times as you need to, like and share. Check out our website for other videos and on this subject. I encourage people, get the shift training. This next month, we are going to be starting up a shift training Facebook group where we're going to train people in this. We're going to example it. We're going to practice on each other. We're going to have furthered education and all of this. But in order to get into the group, you do have to get the course so that we have a foundation to talk about it. And you can simply text me on my website, which is above. Go to my website. You can email me at foggm at outlook.com, or you can go right to the PayPal and donate $175, and there's a little note you can put in there. Put shift training course. Your email address shows up. You'll get a link. You download the course with the training manual, and you will start going through that so that when we open this group, we got a grid to start talking, interacting, practicing, training, and learning how to develop this so that you can not only walk through this with your spouse, within yourself, but you can help others get free from the lies they believed about themselves. Because I truly believe once we start dealing with that, we will begin to experience oneness without uh, without trying to maintain this performance-based mentality. All right. Go back and listen to it. All right. I know we get busy, guys, but take the time. Let your life revolve around this process for a little while, because we're always trying to go further in God, but it's like trudging through mud, and it's a hit and miss, and it's good for a while and it goes away. All of this is based on what I'm talking about. You use every situation to trigger you and deal with your triggers. You won't have to get anywhere to arrive. Everything, all discipleship, everything you've been trying to discipline yourself in and get to and ascend in and embrace becomes an automatic byproduct of a renewed mind. So check that out. Get the course. You can, again, just go to my website, go to donate, put in there 175, put in shift training, and I will send it to your email. All right. And we will get you in to the Facebook group, Nancy, as soon as we get it all ready to go. And I am excited. We're going to be doing calls together, Zoom calls together on there. It's all private, so only those that have gone through the training get to come in. And only those that go through the training and are trained as a shift coach will get the next training, get the opportunity to get the next training this next year, which is going to be on the advanced. The advanced is we're going to go into all the labels of mental illness that aren't actually chemically based, but are emotionally based. We're going to be going into bipolar and disassociation and SRA and CRA. Some people say, what's SRA? Satanic ritual abuse. What's CRA? CRA is Christian ritual abuse. Very similar, but a little bit different. And we're going to look at different lies we believe through these different abuses and ways in which we ask questions to our emotions to surface and be able to break down the layers and get into that belief system so that we can begin to remove the conclusion and bring life. Okay. I think this is really important to learn how to talk to ourselves in a way that targets the pain, deals with it once and for all, and enables us to walk maintenance free and just simply let everything we've been trying to reach for in our spirituality become a byproduct. Okay. So I'm telling you, this is deep stuff. And it's actually really simple once you grab hold of the concept, and you can just practice this and go deeper and deeper and find your flow, find your mojo in this. And once you get it, you're just going to be like, wow. And each one of us, even though it's the same kind of rules or posture, you're all going to minister it from your journey, which is going to add your own flavor, and it's going to be amazing. So I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Get the course while it's available. And we're looking forward to adding extended courses on this for marriage, mini shifts, marriage shifts, different ways in which you shift unbelievers or people that don't believe in God, atheists, those shifting those in other religions. There are so many sides to this. It's going to be awesome. I love you guys. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And we will see you next, let's see, this next Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next Heavy Revy TV. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.